Good evening. Welcome to the shiur. And I'm going to start off. I want to dedicate the shiur for Shema for bentsching Chaim Halevi ben Rivka. And so please join me in just saying Kapitel Chof, and then I'll put some money into tzedakah, and we'll start the actual shiur. Lam natseach misbila David Dayan Levi Yitzchok Raskin Hashem Yaaleh Yishlach Ezracha Mikodesh Mitzion Yisadecha Yizker Kol Min Chaysecha V'Lascha Yidash Nasela Yitin Lecha Chilav Avecha Chol Atosecha Yaaleh Dayan Levi Yitzchok Raskin Hashem Eloheinu Nidger Yaaleh Adonai Kol Mishalesecha Atu Yodati Hishir Adonai Mishicha Ya'anehu Mishmei Kodshoy Yigvores Yeshua Yeminoi Eila Varechev Ve'eila Basusim Anachnu B'Shem Adonai Eloheinu Nazkir Hema Koru V'Nafolo V'Anachnu Kamnu V'Nis Eidod Adonai Yeshua Melech Ya'aneinu Yem Korenu. Okay. All right, so I'm going to share with you something. We'll start off the sikha which we just learned last Shabbos, and it says the following: HaKadosh Baruch Hu is one, Hashem Echad. He gave a Torah which is called one. To the Bnei Yisrael are called Goy Echad. And now the Rebbe explains what's the emphasis of Achdus over here. So we've got Hashem has created many olamas, many worlds, and yet we declare Hashem is the true oneness, true unity. Torah incorporates 613 mitzvahs, and yet it's one Torah. Now the third one is also there's a challenge. All the Bnei Yisrael, we're all different. You have from the whole spectrum from Hashem Cheshivtechem till Shoev Memecha, but despite that there is a difference between, we're all different, yet there's something which we have in Ukudah Mishotef, we have a shared concept which joins us all Yidden to be Goy Echad Ba'aretz, a one nation. Okay, so we have here Hashem Echad, Torah Achas, and Yisrael is Goy Echad Ba'aretz. Now, on Shabbos morning, we learned this Friday night, on Shabbos morning I was chazan in shul, and I'm holding the Sefer Torah. And as you know, the Chazan holds the Sefer Torah and says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and everyone joins in. And it suddenly struck me, why are we saying Hashem Echad when we take out the Sefer Torah? There's a mitzvah of saying Shema, but what's that got to do with Kriyas Torah? That was what bothered me. So after Shabbos, I started doing my homework. And so here we have the source of this of these psukim which we say when we take out the Sefer Torah is in Maseches Sofer. You can see it's Perek Dalet Halocho Ches, and it says there Hamaftir benovihu Poreis al Shema Be'ez Shema Omru B'Shema Shel Sefer Torah. So it looks like that the person who would be given the maftir, which then used to be given to a child, therefore they had to give him some kind of consolation. So consolation, they said, you will also do the Poreis al Shema. What is the Poreis al Shema? That he will lead the Kehillah in saying Shema and also in Baruch Hu. Now, so a bit further on, as you can see in Halocha Tes, V'oiches hamaftis haTorah, v'yomer Shema Yisrael posuk rishon bin imo. So the one who's the Chazan, he's holding the Sefer Torah, and he will say Shema Yisrael aloud, and everyone will repeat after him. And then they're going to say Echad Elokeinu, etc. So the reason why he's saying Shema Yisrael is als Poreis al Shema, to bring everyone who if someone had come late and hadn't said Shema earlier, so now they will be prompted to say Shema. But then it follows on with Echad Elokeinu. Okay, so therefore the position of the Shema Yisrael at Ha'isor Sefer Torah has got to do actually with mitzvahs Krishma. It still is very interesting because then the next phrase, Echad Elokeinu, seems to be emphasizing the Achdus of Hashem, which is not part of the mitzvah of saying Shema, per se. On the spot, in the Siddur Shalom, that's this writing underneath at the bottom of the screen, so he brings here that the Torah is Shemos, the entire Torah is full of Hashem's names. And throughout the Torah, they're woven in Hashem's names in a hidden way. And therefore, in the Torah, you've got this Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad is woven into the Torah. And on the holy days like Shabbos and Yomtov, the gates of wisdom are more open, and therefore we say the posuk of Yichud, the psukim of posuk of Yichud is said when we take out the Sefer Torah. So somebody is saying that in the Sefer Torah there is Hashem's name, and it's not always evident, and that there is Achdus Hashem in the Torah, and that's why we say the posuk of Hashem Echad, and followed by Echad Elokeinu in when we take out the Sefer Torah. All right, interesting. I don't fully understand the wording of the Shalom, but all right, there's a deeper meaning to the reason of saying Echad when we take out the Sefer Torah. And then what was very interesting is that the Shir Rambam, which we had for Shabbos, also tied in with this, because there's this famous Lashon HaRambam of teaching a child Torah. From what stage does the father have to teach the child Torah? Torah. What is it? Malamdo, he teaches him Torah Tziva Lon Moshe Ushma Yisrael. Now, the source of the Rambam is actually in the Gemara, but in the Gemara, in Gemara Sukkah, if not mistaken, it says a child, when he knows how to bench lulav, the father buys him a lulav, tzitzis, whatever it may be, knows how to be atif, buys him tzitzis. When he knows how to speak, so he teaches him Torah Tziva, and he teaches him Shema. But the way you learn in the Gemara, it looks like the Shema is chinuch to say Shema. And yet the way the Rambam presents it, Torah, to teach the child Torah and Shema Yisrael, as if the saying of the Shema Yisrael by the child is part of Limud Torah, which is very interesting. I don't have any more to explain about this, but I saw that some Meforshim do raise this question. Why does the Rambam read that the Shema Yisrael is also part of mitzvahs Limud Torah? But fine, if we understand that the reason why we learn Torah is to be misached with Hashem, and we said before, the Hashem Echad and Yisrael Echad is all interconnected, so then it falls into place a little bit. Okay. Now let's get on to some Shavuos stuff. So now a shliach on campus had this idea, I think they call it a role, to start off a late Shabbos afternoon and start a meal. Let's say you'll call it Shabbos meal for 7 p.m. And then he'll go into Yom Tov, and then it'll be a Yom Tov meal. And then he'll be able to, and he was thinking, then he's asking the question, does he do Retzei and Yaaleh veYovoi at the end of, when they finally get to bentsching, do they do Retzei and Yaaleh veYovoi? So the rule is, if you started a meal, let's say on Rosh Chodesh, and you finished Motzei Rosh Chodesh, let's say sometimes the Chasana starts on Rosh Chodesh and it finishes Motzei Rosh Chodesh, you'll still say Yaaleh veYovoi in bentsching. Purim, you started a meal on Purim and it overflows into by night, and you still say Ala Nissim in bentsching. That's because it's a follow-on. It goes on according to the beginning of the meal, and so that remains. But if you daven Maariv in the middle of that meal, then that cuts off the flow, and once you've daven Maariv of Motzei Rosh Chodesh, you can't go back and say Yaaleh veYovoi. Now, when he's doing this marathon Shabbos Yomtov meal, he's going to do Poreis Mapoh Mekadesh. Poreis Mapoh Mekadesh includes Kiddush, and because it's Motzei Shabbos, it will also include Havdalah. So he's going to have to say Hamavdil ben Kodesh leKodesh. Once you've said Hamavdil ben Kodesh leKodesh, you can't go back and say Retzei. But then afterwards I thought about it. Look, hang on a second. What are you going to do? You're going to Poreis Mapoh Mekadesh. So when Shabbos goes into Yom Tov, so it'll come a shkia. So then you'll cover the chalas and you make kiddush l'koved Yom Tov. Here it's Shabbos going into Yom Tov. Sorry, it's Shabbos going into Yom Tov. You have a chiyuv to do Havdalah. You can't. It's going to come shkia. You can't make kiddush now, because you have to do Havdalah now also. You can't do Havdalah early. Also, we'll come to that soon. You can't do Havdalah early, and therefore you're going to have to wait with Kiddush and Havdalah until Nacht. So what you're going to do in this marathon meal? What you're going to do for 3/4 of an hour between sunset and perhaps more than 3/4 of an hour. So really, I ruined his plan, and he decided, you know what he's going to do? He's going to do a Shabbos meal, take a break for davening Maariv, and then come back and start another meal for Yomtov. Okay, now that's what you have here in Simon, the lower quote in Simon Retzei and Yaal'eh. You're not allowed to eat, drink, taste anything, even water, from the time it comes time for Kiddush. Once it becomes Ben Hashmoshes. So then, once it's become Ben Hashmoshes, you're going to have to. You can't eat further without Kiddush, and in this case also without Havdalah. Okay, let's move on. I think I'm right. The thing is like this. Normally, if you started a meal on Shabbos Yomtov, you can continue, and you don't have to worry about Havdalah. But here, because he has to stop by Ben Hashmoshes to make Kiddush, and you're not going to make Kiddush and Havdalah separately. So therefore, he's going to have to do Havdalah. Because of Havdalah, he has to wait until nightfall. So I don't think it works. Okay, let's move on. So now I got this question on Tuesday was Rosh Chodesh. So someone calls me up from somewhere else in Europe, and they had davened Maariv early. Let's say they davened Maariv at 7 o'clock. It's still light outside, and after that he ate further, or started eating. The poil, he comes to bentsching. It's still light, so it's still Rosh Chodesh, but he's davened Maariv already of Motzei Rosh Chodesh. So does he say Yaaleh veYovoi in bentsching? Is his Yaaleh veYovoi, obstructed by the fact that he's already davened Maariv? So at the time, I was a little bit confused about this, because I know that for example, the Gabe Hefsek Torah, which was mentioned in passing recently, so there's a whole discussion. If you daven Maariv, does it become Nacht in relation to other things? There's also, for example, a question of Sfiras Soimer. Listen to this. Let's say now it's 8:45. If a fellow has just davened Maariv, and he realized that last night he did not count Sfiras Soimer, can he now count Sfiras Soimer of last night, so that tonight, once it gets Nacht, he'll be able to count Sfiras Soimer with a bracha? So subjectively, his davened Maariv has already made it Nacht. Objectively, it's still the day. So that's the discussion in Poskim, whether he can do it. Similarly, we have the discussion about a tefillin. If a person hasn't put on tefillin and they've already davened Maariv, can they put on tefillin after Maariv, but it's still day? Do you say once you daven Maariv it's Nacht, or it's all these all connected? So the poil with the tefillin, the Alter Rebbe takes the view in Siman Lamed that he can put on tefillin, but he shouldn't say a bracha because of the other poskim. It's really quite a lot of discussion about this. Some poskim took the view you've davened Maariv, it's just Nacht Nafartik. In the case of Hefsek Torah, the Tzemach Tzedek is more lenient. The Tzemach Tzedek Piskadinim is more campus-shliach than the way it is in Kitzur Shulchan. So now, therefore, I was a bit confused. The poil, here we have on Simon Kuf Peches. After doing a lot of running around, I finally came to this. This is Simon Kuf Peches Alter Rebbe. And he says, that which you can still say Yaaleh veYovoi in Motzei Yomtov, because you started the meal on Yomtov, or Retzei and Motzei Shabbos, because you started the meal on Shabbos. That's only if you haven't davened Maariv. Afal pisha hatzibur hispalu kvar. The fact that the tzibur has davened Maariv doesn't affect you. But if you've davened Maariv, then you've got a cutoff from the Yomtov. Avol mispal ma'arvis, and he adds afilu b'eidyayin. If you davened Maariv, even you've davened Maariv when it's still light, then you cannot say Yaaleh veYovoi in bentsching, even if you're bentsching also b'eidyayin. So the answer is very clear. It's black and white. At the time, I didn't remember this, so I'm sharing with you that here's a very interesting point. And why is this different to tefillin and all that? in tefillah, it looks like there's the concept of itrei kol desasri, two contradicting voices, because it's tefillah. And therefore, since you've in tefillah, even though you didn't say in tefillah it's Motzei Rosh Chodesh, but since you've davened Maariv, so in tefillah you've made it Nacht, therefore, even for Legabe, it has an effect that you can't, in bentsching, switch back. Very interesting. So there's a difference between other inyonim, which have got to do with the other senses. When it comes to the sense of dibur, there shouldn't be a contradiction. Yeah, in Chassidus it talks about a person being called a medaber. It's much easier to write a lie than to say a lie, because a person is a medaber. So a person to say something which is untrue, to speak, it contradicts with it, jars with himself. Whereas to write something, because that's not the dibur, it's a different chush. It's not such a problem. That's interesting how you have this trait called disaster. Okay. Now, next question was shliach in Ukraine, and Baruch Hashem is far away from where there's active war, monolith's land. But there is a curfew. There's a curfew at 11 o'clock. Nacht is 10:15. And people there are taking the curfew very, very seriously, like probably for good reason. So now his question is, what do I do for the first night of Yomtov? Do I do an early Maariv? So had it not been a Motzei Shabbos, so we all know that the first night of Shavuos, we daven bismanai. That's a chidush of one of the early achronim. That chidush I would have been ready to be mevater on in the circumstances that he should be able to do Maariv earlier so people should get home safely before the curfew. But here, when it comes to a Motzei Shabbos, to say that we're going to do Maariv at 9 o'clock, and people will go home at 9 o'clock, 9:30, whatever it may be, and they will have already davened Maariv. In their mind, perhaps they will see it's already Motzei Shabbos. So it's going to be very confusing to daven Maariv to daven Maariv early on a Motzei Shabbos. So here we got from Simresh Tzaddik Gimel, where it talks about if a person's onus, you could theoretically daven Maariv and do Havdalah on a cup of wine before the end of Shabbos, from Plaga Mincha onwards. But then the Seif Gimel adds, Yesh Oimim, although Chachamim permitted us to do so, one shouldn't do so because it's a Dova Tamuha Larabim. It's very strange. And therefore, that remains that I told him the first night of Yom Tov, he shouldn't, just don't do a minyan for Maariv. Let everyone say it at home, make Kiddush at home and finish. And now, what about the second night? Now, here we have a piece from the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai, he also wrote a Shalos Tshuva Sefer called Rav Pe'olim. And at the end of this quote, you see he refers to this, he's discussed this in the Rav Pe'olim. So he writes the first night of Shavuos, one should wait for Maariv. So he says a Kiddush actually, should wait till Tzesach Echavim because of Tamimos. The second night, he says in Chutz La'aretz, you don't have to wait till nightfall. You can make Kiddush miba'ed yayim. And he says, actually, he says, a good idea to make Kiddush early. You can see the third line. He says, because later on there's lots of flies, and if you're going to eat later, the flies are going to be in abundance, and they may get into your food. That's the reason why he encourages you to have the meal earlier on. Now, then, what's very important now, so he does allow, when necessary, to do this the second night of Shavuos to do Maariv early. Then he says, if you make Kiddush, then the wife also will bench candles early. And it's not called Mechin Yom Tov Rishon L'Yom Sheni, because the neiris which is lighting we're going to eat now. So that's not a problem. Very, very interesting. Now, so he does allow, and that's why I told them, that the second night of Yom Tov, on Sunday evening, they could do an early Maariv after Plaga Mincha, and the people could bentsching at home and before Kiddush. Now, Rabbi Golem of Sheffield probably saw the list of questions, and he brought to my attention two articles, one written in the Sefer Tshuva Me'avo, and one which is from Reb Shimon Sofer, the son of the Chassam Sofer. The other one is from the late Rav Sroya Deblitsky, and they're discussing if a person does have this Suda early on the second evening of Yom Tov, we're running into a risk. Let's ask the question. You're going to have your meal at, let's say, 8:30. You're going to daven Maariv at 8 o'clock, and you have your meal at 8:30. At 5 o'clock, are you allowed to put up a soup to warm up, to be able to have it at 8:30? It's objectively, it's all Yom Tov. But if you're going to daven Maariv, so you've already made it Yom Tov Sheni. So if you put up a soup at 5 o'clock to serve after you've made it Yom Tov Sheni at 8:30, so he raises this problem. That's Rav Sroya Devlitsky. He raises that problem, and actually in the what did I say? The Tshuva Me'ava from the Shimon Sofer, if I'm not mistaken, he allows this, but he says that before benching licht, you should, from every food which you warm up for the night meal, the early evening meal, you should have some food of each dish which you warm up before lichtzinden, and that way you've partaken of it by veYovoi rather than just being for the following. Having said that, even more I'm concerned that, let's say you're going to be making Kiddush at 8 o'clock, 8:30, yeah? For you to warm up a soup now, and the soup will be served after Shkia, you're also running into problems. Because min HaTorah, this is Yom Tov, and by night is going to be Motzei Yom Tov, and you're not allowed to do any melacha on Yom Tov for Motzei Yom Tov, and it might even run into an Issa Deraisa. So therefore, this is all, it is running risks. So let's summarize. If you are going to do this, you could warm up earlier on and have a little bit before Kiddush and all that, but to warm up before Shkia, food that you're going to eat after Shkia, that's something you should definitely avoid. Right, let's move on. So this is not a Shavuos Shiloh, although it's got to do with perhaps got to do with Aseres HaDibros. Well, all Torah has to do with Shavuos. So here's a question. The son asks me, my mother was discharged from hospital, and she goes in for regular treatment, and they say there is that they do allow the relative to remove the intravenous needle. She has an intravenous, and there's a needle, and she doesn't need it the whole time. And so the medical advice allows them to remove it. He's asking from a halacha perspective, is he allowed to remove the needle from his mother's arm? So here we have a din Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Kibud Av V'Em, Simulation Aleph. So it says the following: if a father has got a splinter in his body, so the son should not remove the splinter, because he may cause a wound to the father. And maki ovi ve'imoi, causing a wound to a parent, a mother or father, is a very severe aved. So too, if he is a makis dam, if he is what they used to call a barber who does bloodletting, or he's a doctor, he should not do bloodletting for his father, nor should he do any other medical procedure, even though he's doing so for refuah for the father. Then the Ramo adds, and that's crucial for our discussion, when is it said that the son should not treat his father medically? When there's someone else to deal with it, fine, then delegate it to someone else. But if there's no one else there to do the procedure, for whom it's dire, and the father or mother in this case is in pain, so then the son should do whatever is necessary for the parents' welfare, as they give him permission to do so. So that's what I answered him, that if there's no one else there, that seems to have been the circumstances. So then I said that he should do the removal of the needle. Okay, let's move on. So one of our regular listeners has asked, came up about Yizker, and what's the reason why the minhag is that where children, people who have parents who are both alive, they leave the shul for Yizker. Whilst I'm saying this, I had a couple of people asking, what do they do when they've got Israelis who are only coming to shul one day? Or someone asked me, someone from Eastern Europe, the people who come to him, some of them he knows they're not going to come the second day. So what does he do about Yizker? So to both of them I said, tell them, you can say that those who won't be here in shul tomorrow, well, should say Yizker now quietly. And it's not a reason for everyone else to go leave the room, because I didn't feel it was right to change the minhag to do Yizker on day one, because some people are not going to be there the second day. I didn't think that's right to change the minhag, but to say that people who want to say Yizker won't be here tomorrow, that's okay. My proof to that is, my support is that the Rebbe told over that the Frierdiker Rebbe used to say Yizker on Rosh Hashanah. So although it's not in the Machzor to say it on Rosh Hashanah, I'm probably relying that it's said on Yom Kippur, but he would say it in Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe says, I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just telling you what the Rebbe used to do, and you do what you want. So when the Frierdiker Rebbe said Yizker on Rosh Hashanah, it was obviously there were other people in the room, and they don't know. But because it's not said aloud, it seems to be okay. So what's this business of why the Rebbe was apparently very conscientious that there shouldn't be any children with parents alive. They shouldn't be in the room before Yizker started. So Mashen, this is a quote from the Sefer Orchis Chaim, and he says, Mashen noyagin oison sheyesh lohem abo ve'imo ovaim lotzis b'shas haskara. What's the reason for those who have parents to leave the room, leave the shul for Yizker? Kosav, the Sefer, I guess it's Lechem Chamudos, but I didn't trace where it is. Pen v'ulai, im yihiyu shomo. In case, if those who do have parents remain in the shul, veYovoi lideitos, veYomru gam keini mohem, and they will, in error, join everyone else is saying Yizker. They'll also say Yizker, and they'll say Yizker for a parent sheholach lo ilamoi, uvris kruso lisfosayim. And there's a concept that if you say something, if you utter something, that is kind of precipitating that is going to happen. And therefore, there's an element of sakana here. We don't want the children to, by mistake, say Yizker whilst the parent is alive, which could cause that the parent would pass away sooner. And as a result, that's the minhag of the children going out. As I say, therefore, it makes sense that if whoever says Yizker says it discreetly and no one else is following, then that's the chashash, the concern that someone who just shouldn't be saying says it, falls away. Okay, let's move on. Right. So I don't remember who asked me this, but earlier in the week, someone asked about a brother and sister acting as Kvater. So the Kvater is the couple who chaperone, if that's the right word, bring the baby for the bris. So the baby is by the mother, which is Ezras Noshim. The bris is in the shul, which is Ezras Anoshim. So how does the baby get from one to the other? So the minhag has been established that you have a couple, and the woman takes it from the mother till the door, and the door she gives it over usually to her husband, and then he brings the baby and puts it down, brings it to where the bris will actually be performed. So there we are. Now, minig Yisrael, so it's normal not the minig Yisrael. This is from a sefer. You can see Chos and Kodesh, not to have Kvater with another woman, even if she's an unmarried woman. Certainly, if she is a married woman with a different, not my wife, I wouldn't do a Kvater with someone else's wife. And then he says, even a son-in-law with a mother-in-law or with an aunt or other relations, only a father with a daughter or a son with the mother. He says that's okay. Then he says, what about Chos and Kala who are still Ketanim? It's an interesting one. At any rate, he doesn't talk clearly about a brother and a sister. In the Sefer Psokim with Shuvas, he says the Chayr is the same thing, a brother and a sister. Right. So we have here that brother and sister Misvara, that would be okay. Similar to other immediate Krovim, where it seems to be okay. Let's move on. So here we had a question that someone had it's a party fence, and there used to be a smaller fence, and then this neighbor built a bigger fence, and then in the recent stormy weather, the fence collapsed, and it's still about 2 months later, and the fence is still there, and is wondering what are his rights to get this neighbor to repair it, etc. So here we have in Shulchan Aruch in the Yecheshen Mishpat, so you have a wall abutting someone else's garden. When Nofal and Reuven's wall collapsed and fell into Shimon's garden. Now, coming back to this party wall, the one who's complaining, he didn't build the wall. He was quite happy with the old fence. It was the other neighbor who built the wall on his own expense, his own volition, and who is now failing to deal with it. So now here, so that's why it comes back to this halacha. You got here, Reuven's wall collapsed and fell into Shimon's territory. So then Reuven is obliged. Bezdin will oblige Reuven to remove the debris, the stones which fell into Shimon's garden. If Reuven says to Shimon, yeah, you clear them up and you can keep the stones. So then Shimon can say, no, I'm not interested in your stones. And it's up to you to clear them up, to take them away. But if Shimon said, yeah, okay, fine, I'll clear up the stones, and he cleared up the rubble, and now there's a neat pack of stones. Or something. And now Reuven says to Shimon, oh, now you've made a nice stack of stones. These are my stones. I'll take them back now. I'll pay you whatever your expenses were for doing so. So if Reuven had told Shimon, clear them up and keep them, and then now he wants to take them back, sorry, it's too late. As long as Shimon hasn't acted on it, so then Reuven can still change his mind, and he can still retrieve his own stones. So when he says, you clear him up and keep him, he didn't mean to give it as a matana. Or the fact is that he came and cleared them up himself, so he's obviously just messing around a bit, but he didn't really mean to give it as a gift, after which he wouldn't be able to retract. Okay, so coming back to this collapsed fence, it is obviously then the duty of the owner of the fence to clear it away. If the plaintiff here wants to dismantle the fence and use it for whatever he wants, he's allowed to. Actually, I suggested him just pick it up and shove it and dump it into the other guy's garden. I finished. Let him deal with it. But the halacha, that's what we just saw, that that it is the duty of the owner of the fence to remove it. Next question. Here's like a bit of a difficult question. We've got here two Chabad Sidurim. One says Malchusacha, Malchus Kol Elamim, and the other one says Malchuscha, Malchus Kol Elamim. So the Lamed in Malchus, is it a Shvono or is it a Shvonach? Is it Malchus or Malchus? And as I said, it's a contradiction between two Chabad Sidurim. I don't know whether I've discussed this before. I think so. That the Chabad Tehillas Hashem Siddur is a copy of a Siddur which was printed in Vilna, Retzei and Yaal'eh, and there it followed the policies of Reb Shlomo Zalman Henna, and then the one which the second Siddur, the lower one, is printed in Kfar Chabad in, I'm not sure which year, about 20 years ago. So in Kfar Chabad they retypeset the whole Siddur, and there they scuppered the rules of Reb Zalman Henna, and they followed the rules as spelt out by Reb Motel Schusterman, which is the more widely accepted rules of Diktuk. So there's two opinions in Diktuk whether this is a Shvono or Shvonach. So let's explain. Now, on the next screen, we have here the explanation of what's gone over here. This is from Rabbi Schusterman's Klolei HaDiktuk, and he says the following, and this is in the chapter about Shvo. You don't have two Shvoin, one after the other, at the beginning of the word. It's not possible, it's difficult to pronounce. So let's say the word B'shivtecha, the vase and the tof have both got Shvoin, but you go, then you command it, B'shivtecha, but you can't start off, I don't know what. Well, it doesn't read well to start off with two consecutive shvoin. So as a result of that difficulty, what happens when in concept there should be two consecutive shvoin? Then the first one, Yishtana Shvo Harishon Litnua. Then the first shvo becomes broadened and it becomes a regular vowel. Tnua Zoi Nikres Tnua Sa'oizer or Tnua Kalo. This becomes the name of this, the category. So you've got normally the vowels are divided into two groups of Tnua Gdoila and Tnua Ktano. This one is neither here nor there. It's less than that. Why is it called Tnua Kalo, a slight Tnua? Doesn't have the power. Normally, let's say my name is Yitzchok. So the chirik is followed by a tzaddik with a shava. That's a silent. It becomes Yitzchok. There's a hyphen between the two, because the chirik kind of gets a landing, gives a bit of space with a shvonach. Amram. So the shava of the mem is a shvonach, because then you have two syllables, ram. Now, what he's saying here, if the pasach in question is not an indigenous pasach, but rather it's just a substitute for a shava, then it doesn't have the power to kind of own the shava afterwards. So take a look at the examples which he gives here. Malchei kisvu bichsoy. So let's take a look at the word kisvu. Perhaps it should have been in origin kusavu. That doesn't work. So then it's been expanded to become a chirik, but it doesn't own the shava with a thof to say kisvu. Instead, it's kisavu. It remains as if the sof is the beginning of a word, and therefore it's a shvana. Similarly, in malachei. So perhaps in origin it should have been mulachei, which doesn't work. So therefore, the first shva is expanded to become a pasach, but it doesn't own the lamed with the shva to put a pause between the lamed and the and the Chof, and therefore it remains Malachei. And that's going back. That's what you can see here. That's the explanation here of Malachos, etc. That's according to that shitta. Whereas if you don't accept that shitta, so then you're going to say, well, after Pasach, which is a Tnua Ktano, and the Shvo should be a Shvonach, therefore it should be Mal Choscha, etc. So these are two opinions in Diktuk. I was just, somehow it came to mind also in the word Isbe, Boire Isbe Besomim. How do you pronounce it? Is Isbe or Isve, etc. So it also depends on this in Kitzur Shkonarach, I think in Simon Nun Ches, he discusses about the vowels of the word Isbe Besomim. And it's also got to do with this, that it should have been a regular vowel, and it should be a shvo, and it expanded to become a chirik, and therefore it remains isve rather than ispe. Okay, let's move on. Got one last question, and that is not on the. I don't have anything on the screen, so I got myself into a bit of trouble. A couple of years ago, I wrote 10 points about Mivtza Aseres HaDibros, so my 10 commandments, about the 10 commandments. So there's a hobby, the Rebbe encouraged that people should bring children. People should bring children to hear Kriyas HaTorah, to hear Aseres HaDibros and Shavuos. That was the Rebbe's Mivtza, bring them to shul. But people have, Baruch Hashem, have taken this very seriously, and Baruch Hashem is very popular, and so they start doing Kriyas HaTorah in the afternoon, etc. All right, so becomes a whole parsha, a whole discussion to be able to make a Kriya in the afternoon. How many people do you have to have who haven't heard Kriyas HaTorah, etc. Now I understand that for many of the people who come for your Aseres HaDibros, it might be, they might prefer short and sweet. Just do Aseres HaDibros and then go home. But the position which I had understood is that if you are making a Kriyas HaTorah, you have to do the whole Kriyas HaTorah, and you have to also do Haftarah, the works. So, but what happens if you don't have a minyan? So if you don't have a minyan, so then you're not going to do a Kriyas HaTorah. Okay. But you can still take out the Sefer Torah and read. You can read the Aseres HaDibros. There's no minions, so there's no brachas, etc. Well, just to make things more interesting. So someone suggested, you know what? One of your crowd hasn't said Birkas HaTorah in the morning, so call over Jack, and you tell him, Jack, did you say brachas this morning? No, I don't know what you're talking about. Fine. So you tell Jack, you know what? Say this bracha. Asher bracha banu mikol ha'am v'nosan l'on stereo. So Jack says Birkas HaTorah before, and then you read Aseres HaDibros. So it looks a little bit like it's like something which happens in regular shuls. So someone asked me the following question. Now, so this is, I'm saying I got myself into trouble. So he says, you know what? I've got a minyan, but really, I prefer to send someone out not to have a minyan. And then we'll start off Aseres HaDibros without a minyan, and then we won't have to do whole Kriyas HaTorah. That was his question. And my response to him was that I think we have to kind of think what we're trying to do here, what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to encourage Yiddishkeit. We have an opportunity to do a mitzvah of Kriyas HaTorah with brachas and all that. Now you're saying I can do a trick and not do it. I think you're missing the point. I understand it's inconvenient, and I would suggest, you know what you do? You're going to, before each aliyah, you'll make a little presentation that we're going to this aliyah, we're going to talk about this, and you give it a couple of minutes prep, and then so-and-so is given this aliyah. Then between each aliyah, you make it interesting. You can somehow make it interesting, and then you do a whole Kriyas HaTorah. To say that, I'm going to do a shtick. I shouldn't have to do a Kriyas HaTorah, and I feel that they're missing the point. The point is here that we want to, as I said, the original thing was to bring the children to come to shul. Basically, if you do have a minyan, so who haven't heard Kriyas Torah, do Kriyas Torah, and it'll have some resemblance to what happens in the shul, as Hashem, and the next thing will be they'll be encouraged to participate to come to shul on a regular basis, rather than trying to dilute it deliberately. That's my feeling about it. A lot of people have asked about taking Sefer Torah to the parks, etc., and I have actually been quite discouraging about that. Again, the Rebbe did not encourage to make minyanim in parks. To schlep a Sefer Torah is quite a serious business. I think we mentioned about this last week, about schlepping a Sefer Torah from one place to the other. Sefer Torah is a sacred article, and it has a respectable place in the shul. When you bring it to somewhere else for a Mizal and for a Shiva, again, you designated a respected place for it. So to take a Sefer Torah to the park, I didn't feel was appropriate. But if you do want to bring them to your place, you want to do it outdoors, in your front yard, that is not enough space inside. Okay, but to schlep the Sefer Torah to different premises altogether, that's something which I've tried to discourage. What we have here, someone's talking about the collapsed fence. I think the answer is not so simple. If it's a party fence, both sides have responsibility. Well, the story. All right, I mentioned that actually there was a party fence, and then one neighbor decided, without asking the other one, to replace it, to put up a taller fence. So it totally belongs to him. But fine. Okay, I'm going to stop here and wish you all a good Shabbos and a good Yomtov. Kabbalah Sater b'simcha b'pnimius, and we should meet one another in good health and kol Shlema.
Shkoyach.